here was a couple of texts. Bruce in Kansas says this. I don't think I'm necessarily drinking the Kool-Aid, but Matt Rhule seems genuine and wants to win. That makes me comfortable for now, and I think we'll win the national championship next year. GBR. Okay, that last part. Come on, Bruce. But I like the optimism. I like the optimism. Okay, here is Michael in South Carolina says, I'm pumping the brakes on the 2024 talk. When Frost got here, it was get us this year because year 2 was coming, but it never came. You have every right, Michael and listeners, to be hesitant about any sort of big-time talk about 2024. And right now, yeah, if you look at Twitter, when Matt Rhule tweets, a lot of it is optimism about 2024. Now, that would indicate to me recruiting, not about necessarily the year and how they're going to be in a second year in the program, but that's about maybe the recruits for 2024 and what happens after that. But you're right. I mean, Scott Frost came in here and said they're going to have to adapt to us. By year 2, we're gonna be pretty dang good, and we bought into that. We liked the confidence, we loved the cockiness, and year 2 was disappointing. Nebraska was ranked preseason after finishing 4-2 the previous year after an 0-6 start in 2018. They had bad losses to Indiana in 2019. Colorado, they blew that game up 17-zip at halftime, and it just didn't happen. And their engine never got going. So you have every right, Michael and listeners, to have hesitation about any talk about instant success because we heard that from Scott Frost. But I don't hear Matt Rhule saying that though. I think he'd love to be successful next year and in 2024. But his tweeting about that year is regarding recruiting, in my opinion. Another text here. Nyla says, I will accept the Kool-Aid drinking today, Jake. Thank you, Nyla. Appreciate that. Reality says this in the text line. I'm with you, Jake. Yesterday went incredibly well. I thought Matt Rhule was actually very granular and matter of fact in his presser. The emphasis on players that want to be there and pride in the end is a really good sign. That's what I'm saying. I mean, everybody that talks about NIL and how great it is, NIL has plenty of great perks. It does. There's a lot of good things about NIL. There's also a lot of bad things about NIL because a lot of times, sometimes these kids will say, what place can I get the most dollars at? And they don't really care about the school that they're representing. It's about what can I get there versus school B, school C, and school D. Not every time, but sometimes kids will do that. And I want guys that genuinely want to be here because how many times have we been spurred? Have we been, kicked in the butt by classes that look like they're pretty good, but then all of a sudden 4 or 5 guys don't make it. Maybe some because of academic problems, maybe some because they just didn't want to make it from Florida or Texas or California. And all of a sudden that class that was ranked 28th or 25th is actually more like in the 40s and 50s because those guys never showed up. They didn't want to be here. Now, it's hard to know with all these kids in such a short amount of time if they all truly want to be here. But I think Matt Rhule is saying the right things on the recruiting trail and asking the right questions most importantly. Asking the right questions when you're recruiting a kid is important. Matt Rhule has developed well. Yesterday he was very high on Evan Cooper, who is going to help with the defense also, but he's a recruiting coordinator. He says Evan Cooper is the best in the business. Now, you can believe that if you want, but he says he's the best in the business. He finds the guys that no one's talking about. So you'll see, Matt Rhule said you'll see coming up in the next year or two that Nebraska will offer kids that nobody's offered, no one's seen. But by the time the season comes around or a month or two down the road, you'll start seeing more offers for that kid because Evan Cooper was on them early, and you hope that the early relationship helps you land that early diamond in the rough, so to speak. Okay, from the text line, Reality says he despised the cockiness. Only complete imbeciles think cockiness is a good leadership trait. Leaders may be successful despite their foolish cockiness, never because of it. That's referring to Scott Frost and the previous regime here. So I'm with you there. Kenton Lincoln says, it's still the 32nd ranked class, everyone. One of the lowest since Riley's last year settled down. Well, Kent, again, short amount of time. short amount of time to get the class. 24/7 Sports has them at 28th, at least regarding the high school kids. But yeah, I mean, 30 seconds pretty good for a short amount of time, Kent. They weren't doing that great beforehand. So I'm not and again, like I said before, all throughout the last few weeks and months, the ranking of the class does not always matter. How many times has Nebraska finished above Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, every team in the West, and finished behind them when it came to the season? I'll answer that question is a lot. It happens more often than not that Nebraska is high in the rankings, but when the season plays out, those teams are better because they have a system and they've developed better. And that's what I pray for this staff, that they seem that they're good at it. They think they're good at it. And I hope we see that is development quickly and often. We have a phone call here. If you can hear us, you are on early break. Who do we have here? Go ahead this morning. Oh, text. Caller's gone. Never mind. Before we get to Rick Heyman, I want to get to this real quick. Matt Rhule was asked about Jeff Sims yesterday. Jeff Sims, of course, the transfer from Georgia Tech, who he knows his old coach. Jeff Collins, of course, was a assistant under Matt Rhule at Temple. And Matt Rhule basically said that there's guys in the NFL saying, we got to get this kid. There were guys in the NFL saying that Nebraska should be getting Jeff Sims. Here is the quote from Matt Rhule yesterday. He said, I've had people in the NFL say, hey, you got to get that guy. Everyone recognizes he's an NFL talent, and you get to know him. His personality is elite. He's a really good person about the right things. His former coaches, they loved him, so it was easy if it worked out, and we're grateful he chose to come here. Also regarding Jeff Sims, he says, quote, I've watched a ton of Georgia Tech games, and I fell in love with Jeff just as a player early on. He's dynamic. He's athletic. He's smart. He's big. He's got accuracy. He can throw from the pocket. So when he became available, when we went into the transfer portal, I was already sold on him. So, again, we're going to see. Casey Thompson's coming back. I think he expects to be the starting quarterback, but he probably understands, hey, the team was 4-8. You were great, but you weren't perfect. There's going to be some competition for this job. If Matt Rhule is seeing Jeff Sims as a potential NFL player, that's pretty telling to me about what he expects from next year in terms of a competition. If you believe that this is just Casey's job to lose, it might be his job to lose. But I do believe there will be a battle for the job. And Matt Rhule is very, very, very high on Jeff Sims and potentially being an NFL talent. So I'm curious what he looks like. I can't wait to see Jeff Sims in action if he's here for the spring. He should be here for the spring, by the way. Curious to see what that looks like. But I'm optimistic there regarding that. And I'm very genuinely curious what the battle will look like for the starting quarterback spot for Nebraska. If it's Casey Thompson, Jeff Sims, or somebody else we're not talking about or don't know about yet. So